Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Our guest today is Dr. Doug Harrison, the head of New York University's Applied Undergraduate Studies program at its School for Professional Studies. Doug is no stranger to creating alternative paths that create access inclusion for students. Prior to NYU, he founded the School of Cybersecurity and Information Technology at the University of Maryland's Global Campus, and he currently serves on Turnitin's Customer Advisory Board for AI and for the Sounding Spirit Collaborative at Emory University's Center for Digital Scholarship. In this first of a two-part podcast, Doug joins us to talk about NYU and how it has put in place the structures and processes to create through its School of Professional Studies an alternative pathway for first-gen and low sociodemographic students so that they can get an NYU degree. Doug, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. How's your weather back there in New York?
Oh, as you can see behind me, it's a lovely sunny day in New York, so we'll definitely take it.
Absolutely. This time of year, you guys can get some pretty nasty weather.
Yeah, so we're not glad that it's happening out west, but I'm not sorry that we're being spared today.
So I'm looking forward to our conversation. You're with NYU, and you guys are doing some amazing stuff with respect to creating alternate pathways to a top-tier college degree. Before we get into it, if you wouldn't mind, give us a little bit about your background. You've got a somewhat unusual background for someone getting into this line of work.
You're right. I work with a lot of people who take unconventional paths to higher education, and what we see a lot in those populations is people who take a lot of different twists and turns that don't track with some of the more typical assumptions we make about learners. And that's kind of been my own professional journey. So while I wouldn't have really known to predict it when I started out as a faculty member and an English professor 20 odd years ago, that this is where I would end up now, it's been really a reflection of a lot of serendipity and a lot of discovery as I've gone along the way of how to really be part of the contributions that can help respond to the people who need higher education and don't access it in common ways. So I started out as a faculty member, and then through my own sort of discovery of what was most rewarding in the work and my own reflection on my background as a first generation low income kid from the Ozarks of Missouri who had a sort of transformational experience with public higher education, I really began to orient my career, especially in my leadership and administrative work, really focusing around how to use the management and structures and deliveries of academic programs in post-secondary learning. How can that maximally deliver the transformative impact of a college degree that it indisputably has, I think, and how we can bring those social and economic transformations of that effect, especially for the populations that have been historically excluded from that access and opportunity. So Trinity Washington University, I was there for a while in the Dean's Office of the Historic Women's College. That was really focused on culturally responsive curriculum for Black and Latinx women from the district and around the region to really see themselves in learning and transformation agents in life and work. I then went to the University of Maryland Global Campus, the largest online public university in the U.S., and there I did a lot of different things, but most recently before I left, I founded the School of Cyber and IT, and we were the largest degree granting institution for those fields and the largest minority educator in those fields in the U.S., especially military learners, low income, first gen, really understanding how to bring access to that population at low cost. And then my move to NYU has been really, I think, centered around a focus on how do we really bring the especially transformative impact of an elite, world-renowned global university and bring the power of those degrees to populations that may not always see themselves and haven't really been always understood as typical NYU students. And so that's a really exciting work that we're engaged in now in the School of Professional Studies.
Well, that's a pretty amazing background. And who'd have thunk an English major founding a school for cyber? I'm impressed.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've been very lucky, right? As you sort of step up and embrace the opportunities, you get to engage in some of that lifelong learning we're always talking about. I always like to put the plug in that I think one of the things I hope my career has indicated is that you can really do almost anything with an English degree. So,
well, that's really good. I was a physics major for my undergraduate, and I remember taking courses like Chaucer and His Age, where we read the Canterbury Tales in the original Middle English, and Gawain and the Green Knight in the Welsh. That one was hard.
Yes, that is. It's good for you.
But thoroughly enjoyed those courses as well. But I think you're absolutely right. I think, and we're getting a little bit off topic here, but this is something that I've got a passion. I think a balanced education is so critical nowadays. What do you think?
Absolutely, right. And I think we're focused in the School of Professional Studies, and the division that I lead of applied undergraduate studies. We're really focused on a career-oriented, industry-aligned, market-responsive career transformation around reskilling and upskilling. And that's our mission, our focus, and we're proud of that. And sometimes in this space, I think there can be some assumptions that creep in some sectors that's antithetical to or something different than how we think about a traditional college degree that is really grounded in the liberal arts and humanities. And I would say that the only way I have ever practiced this and the work that we are really committed to at NYU is an absolute fusion of those things, right? So the kinds of things that you're talking about, the kinds of intellectual, cultural, social learning that you did in studying Gawain and the Green Knight or the Canterbury Tales, those are teaching you all sorts of things that are grounded in those enduring skills. Sometimes they get, I think, deprecated as soft skills. I think that's the wrong way to think about them. Those are the enduring skills, that ability to close read other cultures and ways of living. That's a core competency of any time you engage in literature. That is absolutely critical for 21st century life and work. To be a global citizen and of intercultural competence, all those kinds of skills absolutely have to be there alongside the more immediate skills that is responsive to the job trends that we currently see and they're driving sort of the big social economic transformations in life and work. So they're absolutely, I don't think you can have one without the other.
Amen, brother. I love the way you say that. I'm going to borrow a few of those words if you don't mind.
That's absolutely fine.
So getting to NYU, you guys are providing opportunities, especially in your School of Professional Studies. You're providing opportunities for people to get a Tier 1 education for folks that normally wouldn't be able to get that kind of education.
That's right. And I think sometimes too hidden gem of NYU, that part of its commitment to access and equity and inclusion, which plays out in a number of ways across the scores of programs and all the schools. In the School of Professional Studies, which really is focused on the working adult, the reskiller, the upskiller, the professionally oriented undergraduate and graduate students, one of the ways that we fulfill that, and in my division of applied undergraduate studies, is to really be the place for those students to take an unconventional path to college. So if you have at least a semester between high school and college, and you come to NYU, you come to the Division of Applied Undergraduate Studies that really prides itself on meeting students where they are and helping them construct the best pathway to a college degree. What that means in practice is that a lot of our students are degree completers, right? The some college no degree population is upwards of 30 or 40 million in the US, and that's the largest population of higher education addressable market. And so we have lots of students who've had multiple unsuccessful attempts at a post-secondary experience. And so they have lots of diverse transfer credit. And we try to work hard to maximally award that in our degree pathways so that they can accelerate the time to complete their degree and to do it at a lower cost. We also have associate's degrees in my division, which is not as common in elite research universities, but it's one of the ways that NYU is continued committed to building a range of diverse access pathways for students. You can also do those at a lower cost than our full rate on a bachelor's degree. And so for Pell and TAP eligible students, they can attend and complete an associate's degree with no cost of attendance. Those stack into bachelor's degrees. We have online degrees in my division, which help meet those students for whom a traditional Monday, Wednesday, Friday daytime course schedule may not be feasible because of professional obligations, family commitments. So we really try to think about how do we meet as many students where they are through how we are constructing our degree pathways.
Well, let's unpack some of those things because what you're doing is very unique among the Tier 1 schools, just as you said. You talked about the 30 to 40 million people who have some degree. And, you know, the old saying, the most college degree you'll ever get is the one that you never got, or something along those lines. How is it that you can reach out to these folks and get them to enroll?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple of things. First of all, and I think this is really important at the sort of perspective of how you establish a vision and a commitment that can make this possible in the first place. And so when we think about what does this mean for people who have responsibilities to set leadership visions, it's to create the permission structures for the kinds of diverse access pathways that my division constructs and tries to maintain. The School of Professional Studies is there. That has to be a leadership commitment from the top in order to allow you to then construct the processes, the tactics, the operations, the curriculum pathway that can be attractive.
And when you say the top, are you talking about the president? Are you talking about the board, all the above, the state?
All of the above, at least. I mean, I think the ideal is that, yes, from state regulatory accrediting bodies, leadership of the individual institution, both its corporate governance as well as the executive and academic leadership, at all levels, each of them has a role to play in empowering the operation up and down and across the organizational charts to really think about where you sit in your school division program course. What is your role in making sure that we're maximally supporting the most diverse array of students? Even in a traditional classroom, you've got a lot more heterogeneity of background, experience, need, and opportunity than just a single lecture of 350 people might provide. Now, we don't deliver those kind of courses here. We try to meet the kind of students that we serve in a couple of different ways. Because a lot of the adult learners, the professional learners, the some college, no degree learners, they are often looking for programs online. And that's one way that they go out and shop. They aren't necessarily a high school student talking to a counselor who points them to an NYU program that might be good for them. So a big part of attracting our potential student population is working really hard to be great at how we present our programs online and how we optimize our search engine performance so that when a student puts in degree completion, I believe it's true today, it was certainly true last month, NYU is the first thing that comes up because we prioritized investment in SEO to make sure that we're getting in front of prospective students. Now, you can't just rely on that. There has to be a whole up funnel strategy in marketing, admissions, and enrollment management that then is when that student expresses interest, right? When they click on that link, we have a whole number of ways that we work with partners to make sure that we can then custom target additional social media that they might see and get them to the point that they then come to our website and apply. And when they apply, we need to reach out to them very quickly because they're probably shopping around. That's not uncommon for the degree completer, for the reskiller, for the upskiller. That is the core of our student service population. When I talked earlier about what does it mean to leverage the administrative, organizational, operational structures of higher education leadership, it's those kinds of things that have to be very clear about the tactics and strategies. You got to know the student that you're trying to serve and then understand where they are and how the pathways they take to you, rather than the more traditional higher education assumption, which is to say, we're a great institution, you should want to come to us, and that's all on you, right? We really flipped that script and said, it's our job to meet students where they are and understand that they're getting to higher education in a different pathway. And so there's all sorts of really specific tactics and strategies that follow when you really lean into that commitment.
It sounds like you've built, and I'll put it in some of the planning terms that we use, you've built a shared vision across the institution for what you're doing. You've got your processes, your procedures all aligned to be able to do this for your area. And then you have the attunement of the people who are working there who are all in for bringing these folks, some college, no degree, bringing all these folks in. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. We're literally immersed in some of this work right now at the institution. It really speaks directly to, I think, with the kind of thing that you're alluding to. We have a relatively new president, Linda Mills, started in the summer. And she came up in NYU through the student success and student experience world. And she's really made our top priority as an institution to focus on student success in all the ways that means, and especially around equity, access, and inclusion. And so We have an equity and access inclusion network that brings stakeholders from across the schools and colleges at NYU together to really talk about and work together to see what those access pathways can be. And when we get back to that leadership thing, right, but there's got to be that commitment from the top that says, this is a priority for us. And then what are the actual tactics and strategies that we engage in? And so one of the discussions we're having right now is we've recognized that, yes, we have associate's degrees at NYU that I alluded to earlier that are in my division. Now we have an opportunity to create internal articulation agreements with those associate degrees to follow on bachelor's degree completion pathways that might make sense so that we can accelerate the time to degree and lower the cost for students who start with us an associate's degree and then can complete in a follow-on bachelor's degree that makes sense from where they started. So that, again, is got to be both a conceptual commitment and a vision that's laid out there that says we believe in cross-school collaboration. But then there's a very tactical and administrative and operational component where subject matter experts from each school, where the associates and bachelors have to sit down and look at the curriculum and do the articulation and map it out and load it into the SIS and all of those sort of nuts and bolts. So it starts with vision, it goes to strategy, it goes to tactics and operation. All of those have to be aligned and meshed.
That's what we would call holistic thinking.
Yeah, it's a systems approach, right?
Exactly. And so one of the things that really struck me when we spoke a week or so ago was when I asked you how you're doing this, you said there were 4 key components, and I want to unpack each of those. The 4 being the friendly to transfer credit, your delivery modality, doing the associate's degree, which we've gotten into, but also 2 very important, the prior learning assessment. So let's talk a little bit about that transfer credit, because that is critical. And so many students transferring from even accredited junior colleges or other colleges, they lose so many credits.
Yeah, so this is a fascinating topic, and I know we have our ground rules here. This might be the one where you need to tell me to stop being evangelistic because I get really excited about this stuff.
Oh, no, go for it, man.
So transfer credit. This is something that I think so many more elite or selective institutions really have an opportunity to take a kind of gestalt shift on. NYU is not one of these, I'm proud to say, but I think that there is certainly a constellation of thinking and practice in more selective institutions within the US that accepting transfer credit is really discouraged and looked down upon because it's seen as somehow it would be accepting inferior or less academically sound evidence of learning from previous institutions. And that derives from probably some good faith thinking about reputation and academic quality. At the same time, it has some very negative impacts on trying to meet and serve those students who've had unsuccessful degree completion attempts prior to arriving at your institution. And so how we've tried to structure that is in a couple of ways. First of all, we made the case to the university that while there's a fairly lower limit of credit, around the 20 or 30 credit limit for most undergraduates in terms of allowable transfer credit, we made the case that because of the students populations that we're serving, particularly in the Division of Applied Undergraduate Studies, that we should be allowed to accept more transfer credit. And so we can now accept up to 80 credits of transfer into a bachelor's degree. That's really powerful.
That is powerful.
But it's only as powerful as your ability for your curriculum architecture to take in as much of that credit as possible. And so it's not just enough to say, we'll take 80 credits. We've got to have a curriculum that's constructed in a way that can maximally accept that. And so the second part of that is a shift that we're making over the next period of time to offer fewer bachelor's degrees. And why is that important? The more bachelor degree verticals you have built out in more discrete career or disciplinary areas, the harder it is to accept transfer credit, because the transfer credit profile of most of these students, because they've had multiple unsuccessful attempts at previous institutions, they've probably started in psychology maybe and didn't extend. And then maybe they went back for some IT. And then maybe they went back and had some organizational behavior. And if you've got a single vertical in, say, computer science, that is not going to accept a lot of that non-technical diverse transfer credit that's out there. And so we leave a lot on the table, or we just apply it as elective credit. And then the student still has to take additional courses to fulfill the degree requirements of the narrowly constructed vertical. And so by going to fewer, what we might think of as kind of operationally container credentials that are in, say, something like applied technology, Then we have specializations built on top of that still do all the important things that we need to do in technology education. So you can specialize in data, you can specialize in cybersecurity, you can specialize in emergent technology, in fintech, and you can put those together in ways that are maximally responsive to your career goals. And we can maximally apply that transfer credit that's dispersed across a range of disciplines and fields. So that's a really important component. That there's a policy component. How much will you accept? And that's an operational decision. And then there's a very specific tactical and architectural decision that you have to make and implement around the curriculum itself.
Yeah. And by doing these as specializations, you don't run afoul of the accreditor, who generally requires you to do a substantive change if you're changing more than 25% of your original curriculum.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And so here's one of those examples where the different stakeholders in the post-secondary ecosystem are moving at different paces of cultural and operational change around meeting as many students where they are, and especially focusing on this degree completion challenge and opportunity if we're going to live up to what the economy needs and what we want to attain in terms of social transformation. So you're right. If you construct a curriculum on a program core and then you have concentrations, at least in the state of New York, concentration is a very specific and regulated statement to our state oversight authorities that requires state approval. And you can only make substantive changes to that if you go back through what is about a 2-year process to get approval to change that. And that is a good faith process that's meant to ensure academic integrity and quality in the curriculum. So I don't want to impute any bad faith or malevolence to the kind of oversight frameworks that derives from, but it has unintended consequences that have negative impacts on access and equity because it doesn't allow a career-focused curriculum to move at the speed of industry and the economy. If you try to have an AI specialization and wait 2 years to make a substantive change to it, the world will have dramatically and almost entirely changed in that time. And so we're moving to the use of specialization, which don't require us to get approval from the state because they're not transcripted in the traditional way. That's really the indicator of what requires regulatory approval. We're still governing them with the same academic quality, rigor, and integrity that we would in concentrations, but we don't have to seek that 2-year approval. So we can keep up with the speed of term over term change that we see in business, industry, economy, and life. And we then digitally credentialed that to the students. So they still have the benefit of having a credential from NYU that says they have an applied technology degree in cybersecurity and data specializations. And they tell us that digital credential is really more valuable than waiting until it shows up on a piece of paper that they get from the registrar and give to their employer, because the digital credential allows us to talk about the skills affiliated with that learning, not just the name of a course, which is a black box to employers about what's behind it in terms of skills-based learning.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about this transfer credit is you're allowing up to 18 credits for work degrees. Tell me about that.
So yeah, this fall, we launched our first partnership with apprenticeship degrees at the associate's degree level, and we have more coming on in the coming terms. And those are really set up and a reflection of what a partnership strategy really has to be to do this work, to really be fully responsible to this population of students that are looking for career relevant, enduring skills that give them economic and social resilience. It just can't be the post-secondary institution saying, here's a credential, right? Industry's moved away from credentialing as the model and has moved towards the skills forward approach. And so our curriculum has to be aligned to that skills forward approach, which means we have to be very close in contact with employers and industry defining economic sectors to understand where their needs are and how we can maximally help that. And one of the ways we can do that is through work-based learning. We've done apprenticeships and co-ops for some time. We continue to do those. But apprenticeship degrees are really a fairly new concept to the US and fairly rare in more selective or elite institutions. And so we're really excited to be sort of leading in this space in the post-secondary world to say, let's work with employers to identify some job structures that they want to use to increase their workforce, respond to workforce needs. So it often is around job structures that are emergent or job structures that are in high demand areas. And they want to bring in more diverse learners. So they might bring in an employee who's in that job And then at the same time that they're doing that job, we've worked with that employer to identify the workplace deliverables associated with that job structure and map them into our curriculum. We've worked with their supervisor to train the on-the-job supervisor to know how to mentor and support an apprentice who's both a full-time employee and an associate's degree active student at NYU, so that when they complete those deliverables, we can then say, yes, successful completion of those deliverables on the job translates into 18 credits into our associate's degree. In a 30 credit associate's degree, that's a considerable amount of credit that gets them accelerated through the degree. And then they're also taking coursework with us to fill in around that so that they can complete the degree and have the professional impact that often means a promotion or the ability to earn more money in their job and to really cement their professional development at that point.
Those are fabulous things. We could spend 3 hours talking about this easily.
Yeah.
This wraps up the first part of our interview with Doug Harrison. Tune in next week when we conclude this interview about what NYU is doing to create a low-cost alternative pathway at a Tier 1 institution.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.